Hey, everybody. My name is Jane Johnston. I'm with the Briar Hill Group at Remax Camosun, and I'm here with these guests. You guys want to introduce yourself, Sean, and then
Yeah,
Christian and
sure. I'm
Russell?
Sean Provencher. I work with Jane at the Briar Hill Group.
My name is Christian Gourlay, and I am Vice President of our Private Client Solutions team at Waypoint.
Okay, and Russell?
Russell Cass, old, wise, a little stupid. Own a company called Homecheck, and look forward to having a chat with you guys tonight.
Awesome. So I've known Russell for 20 years as a home inspector, and he's done a great job with my client. There's also James Parr here, who's also done a great job with my clients. And I see some people here who we know. So we're doing these education sessions once a month. If you guys are interested in continuing to watch, the purpose is to bring value to you as buyers and sellers so that you're educated, so that when we see these issues in the homes that we can discuss them and also provide an evergreen resource for you so that you can access it whenever you want. So the first thing is, Russell, what is PolyB piping?
So PolyB is a plastic type pipe that was introduced to the world in around about the 70s, but really, as from CSA records, was tested for the first time in 1982, and it was tested annually through to 1998. CSA did the testing, and every year it passed the test. Now, there's a historical failure rate amongst PolyB that puts it in the highest category of failure, but to find out where that failure actually occurs is an important thing, because it was approved for use in Canada and was used for many, many years. The pipe itself has a history of class action lawsuits in BC and in Canada. Actually, they were settled in the court process, so there was no judgment made. Settlement was Shell and BP, sorry, not BP, DuPont. And the settlement, depending on which document you're reading, was between 30 million and 50 million was the settlement. It was a conditional settlement, so it only applied to PolyB that had acetylene fittings. So in other words, the plastic fittings. If you had copper fittings, it did not apply to you. And you had a certain time to take that up. Based on the information I've managed to track down, there were about 758,000 houses in Canada at the time, which, if it was 30 million, meant that everybody got around about $40. And if it was the 50 million, it was about $66.70. So it wasn't a huge, big money spinning thing. The piping itself wasn't really so much of a problem. There were three issues with the pipe. One of them was common knowledge, and the manufacturer stated it, is you could not connect it directly to any heat source. So if it was connected to a hot water tank, it needed a minimum of 18 inches of copper to dissipate heat prior to getting into the pipe itself. There was a second issue in that if you overchlorinated the water, it would create a chemical reaction within the polybutylene pipe, which would begin to flake the inner layer of pipe and thin the walls to where the risk of pipe bursting was real. Now, that would happen generally not in suburban areas. It would happen in rural areas because they were doing their own chlorinating.
Mm.
So the first two issues are really non-issues because in suburban areas, you wouldn't have it. And if you had the copper to dissipate the heat, you wouldn't have the issues of grade expansion and contraction. The third issue is the one that really creates the problem. And the lawsuit and the talking of acetylene fittings confirms it, because what it was the hardened plastic PolyB fitting that would be inserted into the pipe. So the pipe and it's inserted in with a brass ring around that. And then the brass ring would be basically crimped with a crimping tool, which is a fancy name for a pair of pliers that crushes the ring on. So if you're taking a piece of metal and crushing it onto soft plastic pipe or a softer plastic pipe onto a hard plastic inside, sometimes the plumber would hear that as he squeezed, and he knows he's just split the fitting. The dilemma now is to cut the ring off without damaging the pipe. Because if you cut into the pipe, you now got to cut it back and you now have two fittings to put in. And what invariably happened is the plumber wouldn't cut it. He would leave it, complete the job, and then having marked all the ones that were potentially split, they would pressurize the water line. And if nothing leaked, well, then it was done. We're good. Let's go. Those were the ones that would ultimately fail. And it's a big factor in creating the high leak ratio that occurred with that type of piping, which really, if you think about it, is a fitment issue, not actually a plumbing pipe issue.
So I'm just going to put my hand up. Anybody can put their hand up if they want to ask a question. Just from our podcast, it's just a habit, so I apologize. So Christian, we're told as realtors when we're going through, I look for the plumbing anyway to see if it's PolyB or not. So it's a dark gray plastic. It's not white and it's not copper. It's very distinctive. And sometimes I see the copper fittings. Sometimes I see the plastic fittings, depends where. And I'm wondering, is it insurable to have PolyB in your house? That's a real question that people want to know.
Yeah, well, so it is, but I would say there's a but to it. Because firstly, because it is a concern for so many insurers, you are reducing the amount of choice you have, right? And typically when you have less choice or less supply of something, there's an effect on the price. So, I'd say all else equal, the insurers that will help with that, maybe a little bit more on the pricey side. I would say that, like polybutylene, from my sight lines here, is just sort of one piece of a bigger puzzle of whether the home is insurable. And so I think where I'd like to just caution people a bit is to say, well, look, you could find an insurer that is okay with polybutylene in the form that it's at, but maybe that insurer is not okay with some other situation. So for example, maybe the homeowner also wants to have a daycare in their home, or they've got a business that they're operating. And why that could be a factor to consider is that while the insurer may accept the polybutylene, they may not accept the other things that are happening, in which case now you've got even fewer choices. In terms of what Russell was mentioning, certainly copper fittings are preferred. The options that we do have available, we do want to see copper fittings, or an inspection or something equivalent to that effect. We do have some insurers that are on the high value side that have a different approach to it. But I guess to answer your question, yes, it is insurable. It's not ideal, but some potential other things to consider.
So here's the issue is that in some communities that were all developed around the same time, and I'm not going to mention what communities because I don't want to stigmatize the communities, they were all built with PolyB. And so last year I had a listing where we had 40%, actually we had 50% PolyB. It was all on the cold water lines. The hot water lines were all copper. I'm not sure if Russell did the inspection or not, or maybe James. Anyway, so the buyer took it to the insurance company. The insurance company said, because you have more than 40% of PolyB in the house, we can't insure the house. And this is one of the things, by the way, that most buyers forget to do. They just assume the house is insurable because it's being insured. But so we had to reduce the price to get, we actually asked for proof that they couldn't get insurance. And we were told because it's over 40%, that they wouldn't insure, which I thought was crazy. Is it, so what I'm asking, I guess, is maybe it is insurable. Is it going to be something that people have to handle in the future? Because I know in apartment buildings, if it fails, it's on the 12th floor, you're going to have a flood on 11 levels. But in a house, it's really only your property. Or do you have a higher deductible for
Well,
water?
I think you have to look at the insurance industry a bit like walking into a casino and playing blackjack, right? You've got a house that's only engaging in this game because they know they're likely to be able to win, right? That's why you see places like Las Vegas. Um, I think when the insurers get wind of a potential where, they may be pulling in a $2,000 or $3,000 premium, but they may have to pay out 50,000, 100,000, some other number very quickly. That's not a proposition they like, especially when they have a lineup of all these other people asking for their services that don't have that same risk profile.
Mm.
It's a funny market that we're in. Like when I first started in this business back, it was over 20 years ago, it was the complete flip side of that. I mean, every insurer wanted everything that was out there. They were crazy hungry for new business. There weren't a lot of underwriting concerns that would stop us from binding business. But we're in what we would call a hard market right now, and we have been for about the last 4 years. And so in many cases, the insurers are really kind of slowing the process down a little bit and saying, well, we want your business, but it has to fit in this kind of nice, neat box and look profitable to us. And so I think that's where the concern can be. You mentioned a bit about the hot water lines, the cold water lines, and Russell did too. And I just would caution that not probably being too much of a factor to an insurer. The insurer is just saying, is the polybutylene there or not? In terms of their interpretation of it, it's likely that they can't quite control whether that's true or not, right?
Yeah, well, we were on the other side of the equation there, so it's not. I don't know. I always tell the truth. I wasn't sure if they were telling the truth. I'm assuming they were telling the truth. Russell?
Yeah, so just to speak to that, there's a couple of interesting points here. One is PolyB was approved for use in Canada. I look at this as if you're approved by code, how can an insurer say they won't insure it? It's kind of to me like a 16-year-old walking in to get a car insurance and their insurer saying, well, you really don't have any experience. Come back when you got driving experience. You can't do that.
Well, not in BC, but you can do that in other jurisdictions, and you would do it by way of pricing mechanisms, basically.
Well, and okay, so I accept that. But the big clanger to this, it's never been withdrawn anywhere in Canada. There's never been an order to recall it, ever. Now, there are orders, but they're kind of humorous because I read stuff online about the National Plumbing Code having forbid it in the 2005 National Plumbing Code. No such thing occurs. They list the pipes that can be used, but they don't list polybutylene. That doesn't mean it's withdrawn. The last year it was manufactured was 98, so why would it be mentioned in the 2005 Plumbing Code? There's a lot of misinformation on the internet about the pipe, and I'm not saying the pipe is a wonderful pipe, because all pipes will wear out. But it's unfair because I've seen PolyB in houses that's been there since 1982 and still functioning, but copper fittings, not deacetylene. The lawsuit only mentions acetylene, so we know where the core of the problem is. I find it odd that insurance companies, and I understand we all work on profit, would say we can't insure you, because I think it really should be taken up with superintendent of insurance to forbid it. And I understand, load the insurance, fair enough. If an owner doesn't like that, you replace the piping. But I can't see that it could be not insured because it's compliant with everything it was ever required to be compliant with.
So,
I don't know if you guys have got any comments.
Paulette here has a comment. Sean, do you want to? deal with that?
Paulette shared that in 2006, the Supreme Court made a ruling that insurance companies were not obligated to insure homes with PolyB. And she continues, so they were protecting insurers instead of the homeowners.
What do you think, Christian?
Well, I mean, let me first state that I'm a broker, not an insurer. So I don't make rules. I simply follow the rules that are created for me.
We like you, Christian.
So
We
I
want
would
to
say,
like you, Christian.
I would say the good news is, as a broker, there are options out there. I mean, you know, there's some ways to get around this. It's just that it's very difficult for me to say, here's one solution, and this one solution will apply to everyone. I think one of the most important things that a homeowner can do to mitigate the risk is to install an automatic water shutoff device, like a flow-based device, like Mow and Flow. Russell, I'm not sure if you're familiar with those.
I am.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, they're fantastic because they use like algorithms in them to really look at your water usage from a holistic approach. And so I have the Mow and Flow in my home. I'm quite familiar with it. And so, for example, one of the things it'll do is it'll know that no one in my home is using water, say, between midnight and 6 a.m. We're sleeping. So it will detect micro leaks and it'll say something. You know, if my toilet flapper is loose, it'll send me a report in the morning saying, we see water usage and that shouldn't happen. And if it sees more water than, you know, just some incidental water use, it'll shut the water off until I've addressed it. And I think that could be a really useful, you know, piece of technology to have in your
Mitigation.
home.
Yeah.
For all homeowners that have, you know, plumbing in their home, because it can. I don't have polybutylene in my home, but I have PEX and copper, and I've had 3 instances where things have gone wrong, and they weren't for the piping; they were from. One was a steel braided line, one was a dishwasher, and the other was a washing machine. And so these are all things that would get picked up by that. They can vary in terms of whether or not the insurer will accept them. So, for example, I work mostly on high value homes, so I have a different kind of market that I work with. But Chubb, for example, is an insurer of high value homes. They will write polybutylene. They don't concern themselves too much about it. As long as there's been no prior losses. However, they will stipulate that the homeowner installs a flow-based water shutoff device within 60 days.
Sean?
Yeah, well, and I kind of feel like this is a big question that people have because there might be people on this call who aren't buying, but they live in a home and they know that it has some PolyB in it. So, Russ, what would you say are some of the things aside from a flow monitoring system that people can do that would help them mitigate the risk? And, you know, maybe if you don't mind, aside from completely ripping open the walls and starting to replace pipes throughout the property, what are some of the other options that someone would do while getting there?
Just before you answer, I just want to say that I do know that this also relates to the realtor's experience, because some realtors are telling sellers they have to replace the PolyB, or it's coming up in an inspection and the buyer is requesting that the PolyB be replaced or money off. So it's a negotiating term. So this is a real crux of the issue: is does a seller replace the PolyB because this may come up, or do you disclose it right up front so that any buyer knows that there is this type of plumbing in the house, and then you don't have the discussion, the finding out? Russell, what do you think?
I mean, disclosing it is an option. I don't think you're required to because, like I said, it's been code approved when it was installed. The fact that we've moved on, you're always locked into the code to which you were approved. But I've got a little safety tip thing here, which was produced by Province of Alberta. And they talk about if you've got copper fittings, you're fine. They talk about it being certified by CSA. So going back to Sean's question, the advice I'd give anybody with PolyB would be the same with copper or PEX. PEX has a whole series of problems that, I mean, the public's totally unaware of. it's highly susceptible to decay and fast decay if it's exposed to UV. It'll get brittle like glass and just snap. Insurer hasn't picked that one up yet, apparently. So they, let it go. But it's code approved, so is copper. Cast iron, just so you know, can't be used underwater. Go figure. There's all kinds of things that you pick up in the codes. PolyB, installed correctly, copper fittings will act just like any other pipe. It'll eventually wear out, it'll eventually leak, but so will all the others. The big hoo-ha is created on the internet. Go on the internet. I cannot believe the shite that I read on that. Plumbers advising to replace, if you see it, replace it. Well, I wonder why they say that. I'm going to guess, James. I see you shaking your head vigorously.
Oh, Joelle has a question.
Joelle?
Yeah, more comment. I do understand that at the time that these homes were built, it was up to code standards for those times, and code does change over the years. So today, if a home was being built, I don't feel that the PolyB would be considered code. But you also have to look at other things that have changed and evolved over time that might still meet code. For example, an oil tank. But we all know that they can leak. So it's not necessarily that the item that we're discussing is the root of the, well, it is the root of the problem, but it's not the bigger picture is the type of losses that happen. So if that plumbing fails, it's the amount of money that the insurance companies have to pay to get that home back up to where it was. So they're trying to mitigate going, okay, this is the type of plumbing that does have a tendency to fail 100%. There's going to be some homes that you don't see it, and it could be like 70 years old and they've had no losses. But they're realizing, okay, this is something that can fail. So it's a higher risk for the insurance company, just like oil tanks. If that oil tank leaks and they don't have certain exclusions to cover or to exclude, like remediating the land, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for something so simple. Yet an oil tank, you could still probably purchase it and get oil into your home, but it's just one of those things that evolves over time. And the other thing too to consider is the insurance companies who maybe today accept PolyB, underwriting guidelines change like almost daily. So it's possible that what they say is fine today, in 3 weeks, 2 months, 5 years, they say, sorry, it's no longer qualified. So us, I think, as insurance brokers, just try to educate our clients to the possible risks and insurability. And we just try to do our due diligence to our clients to say, this probably isn't the best type of material, and recommend that it be replaced. And to what has Christian said, like some insurers are fine with it and some aren't, but that could change at any moment.
Well, yeah, again, more of a comment. And I think this is the challenge with PolyB, because you described it as like a simple thing. And it really is, right? Like it's pipes that bring water to taps in your house. It sounds simple. And we compare it to an oil tank. We're like, yeah, those aren't great to have in your property either. But if you want to replace or remove an oil tank, it's in one place. If you want to replace plumbing throughout a property, you're opening up a tremendous extent of the property. So I think that's really the big issue with PolyB. It's the disruption and the number of homes that it's built in. It either removes a massive section of the market from a buyer's potential search, and they don't even know if there's PolyB in it, or they're looking at something that they don't even know if it will need to be replaced, or if you might replace it and then in the end it wasn't really necessary. But at the end of the day, in order to replace it, you have to open up holes throughout the entire structure. So James, you had your hand up.
Back to Christian too. So if you get a mow and flow added to your home and it's guiding you through potential water leaks, things along those lines, and you've got insurance on your house with a mow and flow, but you're continuously getting leaks throughout your house from the PolyB, is that still going to be covered, or is your deductible going to go up, or how is that going to work with insurance saying you're covered when you have the mow and flow, but if you're constantly having issues with the potential of PolyB, what's the insurance company going to do about that? Is the deductible going to go up, or is it going to be told that you have to replace the system?
So I right off the bat, I mean, if you have a water loss, it's not necessarily one that you would be reporting and claiming. So for example, in the case of a water shutoff device like a Mow and Flow, picking up a small leak, it's alerting you, shutting off the water quickly, making sure there isn't a huge water loss. You may be able to just simply deal with that with, a mop or a vacuum and, call your plumber up and get them to deal with the leak. So there's a little bit of protection, I think, in that. One of the things that I noticed when I installed mine was that the software app was alerting me to very high water pressure in my home,
Hmm.
which at first we thought was actually a failure of the Mow and Flow in terms of what it was picking up. I think it had something like 105 psi, but don't quote me on that. But it was higher than what it should be, which I believe is around 40. Russell, is that kind of closer?
Yeah, 40 to 60 in that range.
Yeah. So what we thought, well, what do we do here? Do we replace the Mow and Flow, or do we go and replace the pressure reducing valve? And so we did that, and it turned out that was actually the pressure reducing valve coming in off the street that had failed somehow. Not a plumber, I don't know how that would happen, but when we replaced it as a $150 part, my PSI dropped, I think, like 45. So I thought that was sort of an interesting thing, because even without having polybutylene plumbing in my home, having that high PSI would have potentially led to a failure with something. I have seen building inspections come back where there is polybutylene plumbing in the home, but then you also have this added comment from the inspector saying, I'm detecting very high pressure. The combination of those two things is probably not good. Maybe I'll let Russell comment on that, but I think an initial thought I would have here is that if you do have polybutylene in your home and it's got copper crimps and the insurance company saying it's okay, if you're still concerned about the potential for there to be a leak, again, you looking at that water shutoff device, it may be two things: not only alerting you to a leak, but also alerting you to an issue with pressure that you may not otherwise see, that may have contributing factor on the loss of the PolyB.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to respond to a couple of things that are just being said. One is the oil tank issue. Insurers have pretty much removed their risk. And they did this some years ago. They don't want the oil tank inside. They want it outside. There is no environmental protection. So if it leaks into the ground, they're not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. You are. So in that, they've mitigated their risk. Without increasing deductibles and all that sort of stuff. With PolyB, it's a little different because when we talk about code, when you're approved in the 1965 National Building Code, 1960, whichever year it is, you are held in that code forever, unless you replace a system in its entirety, in which case you must upgrade to current code. So if you apply to have polybutylene pipe as part of your plumbing system in the approved years 82 to 98, you're not required by code to replace it. And I can't see how somebody else can tell you you must replace it, because that, in my mind, isn't legal. Insurer can say, we'll insure you, but your deductible is going to be $5,000 per occurrence, and your insurance is going to be 1.5 times what it normally will be, or double. That I understand. But the pipe itself, copper fittings, has proved to be almost reliable as a copper pipe would be, and every single system will ultimately fail. That's just a matter of course. And when it does fail, you must replace it with, if you're replacing the system, with what meets current code. And that's how things get upgraded. It shouldn't be upgraded by an individual jumping in the middle and saying, well, we don't like it, so we want you to replace it. And I'm not trying to defend PolyB. I'm just telling you what the facts are.
Yeah. Sean?
Well, how about in a strata corporation? Because I know in other provinces, like a strata or a condo corporation in the past has created a special levy in order to force people to remediate PolyB or other similar types of plumbing. Is that something that we've seen in BC, Christian?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a concern. Sometimes it'll manifest its way into, a strata certificate where you're seeing very high water deductibles, things exceeding 100,000. And that's usually a sign there's been, some leaks that have occurred there from some of the unit owners. I don't work in the commercial strata market on the, those larger buildings. So I'm not, up to speed on what some of the current concerns are. But it can be a difficult market when it comes to claims. Again, just kind of looking back to the whole picture of, the insurers are in business to make money. I mean, that's how this works. And if they feel like they're not going to make money, they're just not going to be either
amenable
to the table, right? Or they're
Yeah.
going to just simply price it so high. Yeah.
So you can get insurance for your insurance deduction. So you can pay like $5 a month to get $100,000 deductible insured. I have a client who did that. And there are certain buildings, I guess, like once you start to go around and look at buildings, you do see that there are buildings that have issues. You can read it in the strata docs. And that's why we have Russell actually review strata with us, because he's very valuable at seeing what's happening in the building over time. And there are some buildings that have mitigated the water issues through a company called High Tech, which takes out all the minerals and stuff and makes the water more smooth so that the system lasts longer so when you're going through those bends and elbows and stuff, everything is it coats the inside of the pipe, right, Russell?
Yeah, it actually injects additional minerals.
Oh, okay,
and
injects. Okay.
Yeah, turns the water from a acidic nature to an alkaline and removes all the friction. And then in doing that, it cleans the pipe, scrubs it, and the additional minerals begin to adhere to the inside of the pipe, creating about a millimeter thick liner. The other side effect of that is that over the next 4 to 6 years, all of the water being flushed in toilets and running out of tubs and showers and so on goes through the waste lines and does the same thing with them. It cleans them. It then prevents having to water jet your pipes every couple of years. So there's sufficient savings in that. But interestingly, I lived in a condo 4 years ago, and I approached my insurer about putting a flow shutoff valve onto my main water shutoff, and I wanted to know what the discount would be in my insurance, and they told me nothing. So what's the motive? We're all in business to make money. As the insurer is, so are we. And as a member of the public, in that instance, why would I go to the expense if there was no benefit?
Well,
Well,
I can name two benefits. One would be just future insurance eligibility, right? So if you have claims, and maybe this would address a little bit more of James's question there, because I don't think I answered it entirely. But if you have too many claims, eventually you're going to remove yourself from the
that market.
advertising risks that an insurer may want. The other is just your disruption of your life. There are several insurance companies that do not provide discounts for things like sewer backflow valves or these water shutoff devices. But, sometimes spending that couple $1,000s to put that in, if it's going to save this giant disruption of your life with dryers in your house for days on end and drywall dust and contractors and all this, it's probably still money well spent.
And I agree with you on the face of it. But the other viewpoint could be, well, the reason you don't want to give me a discount is so that you can increase my premiums if I have a problem.
Russell's a disruptor,
spitballing.
okay?
No, no,
Russell, I'm just going to ask quick. Do you like or
No.
not like insurance companies? I'm having a hard time catching.
No. I believe in insurance. I think it's the worst investment you ever make in your life until you have a claim.
Yeah.
So I'm a believer. It's like saving money for your old age. What a waste of time until you become old. So I believe in insurance, but I think it must be fair to tell people that you will not insure them for something that's code approved. To me, flies right in the face of that is not acceptable.
Hold on, we have a question or a comment from Renata.
I just wanted to ask, I know, Russell, that you said that the PolyB was banned, I believe, if ni in 1998. Is
Never
it
banned.
common?
No,
Sorry?
Not banned.
they ceased to make it. They
Okay,
used to
so
make PolyB, and then they made polypropylene.
okay, so after the 1998, is it still common, or how common is it, and do we see it still after that year in properties?
Yes, because they were built in 83, and they still have polybutylene piping, and it still works.
Okay, I meant like in the buildings that would be built after 1998.
No,
Okay,
because it wasn't made.
right.
Polyethylene replaced it. Same type of manufacturers, but it's commonly called PEX, polyethylene.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Hmm. So is it me or does insurance go through fads? I've been in real estate 19 years now and I'm seeing fads. So to me, PolyB is a bit of a fad.
Well, I mean, statistically, it has the highest leak ratio. The leak ratio is created by the plastic fittings, the hardened PolyB fittings. That's directly where the response is. And that's what all the court cases say. If you had copper fittings, no claim.
Can I just show a couple of examples?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is the one that Russell's really talking about here. You can see in the center, it's plastic, same color as the piping itself. The
That's
other
actually
concern,
got aluminum, but has that got aluminum
yes, it
rings on
does.
it?
It's got the
Yeah,
even
another
worse
issue.
connections.
Yeah.
The other thing too is if you turn it sideways and you take a look inside, you can see it's a single tube system. So the potential with the single tube system is it breaks down faster when it has minerals and materials on that product. Whereas the new PEX has a double walled system, which is black and white, in order to be able to protect the piping just a little bit better. This is the one here that Russell's talking about, which is usually the one that's accepted, but still has potential fail rates in it just because of the fact of the PolyB single tube system itself.
So sorry, when you say single tube system, you mean that more modern versions of the same pipe are going to have two sleeves. So
Correct.
you'll see two
Double
layers
layer.
when you look at a cross section.
Yeah, so
Can you-
plastic PEX has black inside, and then it has the white on the outside, and the white's supposed to be UV protectant, and then that protects the black pipe from degrading from UV.
Gotcha.
But again, as Russell was saying, you can still get the deterioration if it's left outside for too long.
Okay. I am a realtor, so I'm not a home inspector. Okay. I walk into a house and it's built, actually, let's leave the year out of it. And I see this gray pipe. Okay. Assuming that it was built before 98, maybe it was between 82 and 98, maybe it was before 82, but they upgraded some piping at some point. But I walk in and I see this gray pipe. Here's my question. Is it definitely PolyB, or could it be some other pleasant gray pipe that isn't going to cause a problem?
Polybutylene
The
will have a
smoking
stamp.
gun is the gray pipe.
Yeah, so polybutylene will have a stamp on it, and it'll be PB and then a number. And if you see that, you know it's polybutylene.
Okay. Well, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking you
Now-
off the pin there, James.
And another thing that happened is a lot of contractors through the 80s, copper's always been kind of the Rolls-Royce of plumbing. So they would construct a house with everything visible on the inside going into the wall as copper, but connecting to PolyB inside. So often when we're doing an inspection, all you see is copper. Unless there's a crawl space, then you can actually see what the piping is. But if there isn't, your guess is it looks copper, but I know it was built in the 82 to 98 years. So there's a possibility of PolyB, but I don't see it.
House flippers used to do this with knob and tube wiring too. They'd push a couple feet of newer wiring into the wall.
They could pigtail it as well, right? Is that what you mean?
Well,
Yes.
that was aluminum wire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about
I'm just getting everything slightly off today.
No,
Yeah, me too. Evening webinar. Okay, here's another question. What years, because if I'm not mistaken, the especially poor plastic fittings are the ones that we want to watch out for. Those were on the beginning end of the time frame. So they started in 92. Like, can you give me a rundown? When were they using plastic fittings?
so right in the inception, they used them. In fact, you could buy them right through to 98. But most plumbers got sick and tired of hearing that thing split, and they made the change to copper.
Gotcha.
Okay, are there any questions? Any other questions?
This is the opportunity to find out the winning lottery numbers. Nobody going to ask me? Okay, don't worry.
Hi, it's Sandra.
Hi,
I have
Sandra.
a question.
Mhm.
I was interested. Somebody sent me the link because I'm in a strata and we have PolyB, but it's the copper. And when I had a good house inspector who found out that my plumber cut through my floor joists, which is not a good thing, but the strata paid for it. And he said, yeah, the PolyB with the copper plumbing is fine. But now our depreciation report is saying that because our plumbing is over 30 years old in PolyB, we should start factoring replacement of the plumbing. We haven't had a problem with our insurance company. They basically said they don't have a concern, probably mainly because our stratas are primarily townhouses and the majority of them are one level. So we wouldn't have that problem of multiple leaks going down to units below. So low risk from an insurance company's point of view. But have you guys heard of that and I don't know if because maybe in real estate you've come across that, is like the engineering company is saying, hey, you guys should replace all this PolyB plumbing. But then the
All right.
engineering companies also say you should replace all your siding because they just look at the lifetime of the project.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here because the regulation that governs depreciation report, so the strata property regulation, part 6.2 is very specific, and most people doing depreciation reports completely miss it. What it states is that the person doing the report must comprise a physical asset inventory and an evaluation, which must include repairs and maintenance. What they just got told by the regulator is that they need to create a repair and maintenance protocol for every single asset in the building. And so when you say replace all the plumbing pipes, that's not what the regulation is telling you to do. It does allow for replacement, but your replacement could be phased. It could be done over time. It could be done however owners agree to do it, but you're not forced into that in terms of the regulation.
No, and the engineering company is just recommending that we start looking at a phased approach for our PolyB plumbing, and they don't actually say, hey, it's wrong, you got to get rid of it. They're just saying, hey, your plumbing's getting older, you should be looking at a phased approach. It's just our councils now kind of, I think they're like, the sky is falling a little bit because they're saying, well, we should start doing this right away.
Do you have a boiler in your building?
No, we're electric baseboard.
No. I mean, for your domestic hot water, do you have a boiler or individual hot water tanks?
Individual hot water tanks.
Okay, so you're not creating extreme acidic nature in the water, which means you have less friction. You hardly have any water moving until somebody opens a tap in their unit. So your pipes are going to last probably anywhere in the range 30 to 50 years. However, if they're suggesting that you start to phase replacement, that's compliant with the regulation. If they're telling you just replace it all with no justification or testing, that's not correct.
And
I just
want to
say, Sandra,
Sandra,
I just want to say, like, we look at a lot of different stratas. We read a lot of different reports. I am not qualified to analyze them. Neither is Sean, being realtors. But Russell actually writes depreciation reports And one of the things that we've noticed is that certain engineers have a bent towards writing reports a certain way. And so it's important to get a second opinion is what I'm saying. What do you think,
Yeah, and
Russell?
it's fairly
Russell,
easy. I mean,
what's
no,
your company?
yeah, I'm not. I'll tell you that off the air, but because
Okay.
I'm not touting here for business, but it's
Sure, I
fairly
understand.
easy. All you need to do is get a plumber to come in, shut a section of pipe off, cut a piece out, replace it, take that piece, send it off to a lab, and let them check the thickness, and they'll tell you how much life is left.
There, I put the name of the company in.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like we go to lots of home inspections in condos. We look at not only the unit, we look at the building as a whole, we look at the roof, we look at the downspouts, we look at the windows, we look at the building envelope, the balconies. It's all part of the exterior, which is shared common property. And there can be buildings. There was a building recently where they were saying they were going to have they were going to restucco the entire siding of the building, and they did need to do it. They actually had reports from 20 years ago that they didn't follow through on when the balconies needed less repair. But there are strategies to do this. The phase replacement is a good idea. And I will tell you, for my own home insurance, I was told that if my pipes were over 40 years, they wouldn't, I have a 1980 home, that they wouldn't insure it. And so I just changed companies. But I also got a second opinion about how this system is operating. And I think that's really important. I would get your strata to get somebody else in to give you an independent assessment.
They did have a plumbing company come in and do an assessment. They haven't sent us the report yet. But that's why when because I was talking about this with some friends, and then somebody sent this link because I thought, oh, good, because you guys will have had lots of experience with this, right? And I'm not looking for like professional recommendations. I'm just looking for what you guys have seen and heard.
Perspective, right?
Yeah, perspective, exactly.
The plumber or the plumbing company that came to do a report, did they cut sections of pipe out, or they just look at it?
As far as I know, they just looked at it, but because they wanted to come into each unit, and then and the council's not as organized as I would like, but everybody's volunteers. But they did come in, and even though they didn't really ask permission, when they got here, they looked in the crawls and in the attics of a couple units. Like, they looked in every unit. And then they also said, oh, and we want to see your hot water tank, and we want to see your PVR. And so he did test water pressure and I don't think he tested the water shutoffs, but he did check to make sure that all the hot water tanks had an expansion tank, because that's now code, that they all have that expansion tank. And it's in our bylaws that you have to, obviously replace your hot water tank upon expiry, and we track all that.
Christian, what do you think about
this? We haven't had any major issues. I mean, I've only been here about 6 years, but I was asking around to some of the longtime residents, and most of the water issues we've had have been things like, one person, the estate was looking after it. Nobody shut off the main water shutoff, and they had old rubber hoses on the washing machine, and the washing machine hose blew. So yeah. I'm not aware of anybody where they've had the actual PolyB pipe fail that anyone can remember. So that's kind of, I'm trying to get perspective about, how, and I know from the depreciation report, because when I bought in here, you guys have probably heard, I had Condo Clear come and examine all my strata documents, and I was quite impressed by them, and I had a good home inspector, so I got a lot of information on, and I know with depreciation reports, they always just look at the lifetime of the product and say, hey, your siding lasts X amount of years, so replace it. But then as you get closer, they come and do inspection, and then sometimes give you more time. And I think, but that suggestion about having the section of the pipe cut is really good information, because I'll pass that on to my strata council and ask them if that was done. And if not, then why not? And it may be because they're not aware of it.
Simply looking at the pipes just tells you what type of piping it is, but doesn't tell you what the wear ratio is.
And in fact, I questioned my council on, why are they moving ahead with this when they haven't really provided us much in the way of reports or documentation. And they kind of said, well, you can't really tell if PolyB is good or bad unless it fails. So that's not
that's not true. We know now.
Now we know we can test it.
Sean?
Just to give you a bit more of the perspective that maybe you're looking for, Sandra, when you hire a home inspector, their job is to list every single thing that isn't as good as it could be with the house. That's their job. And it's the same thing with a depreciation report. So they create a report and they show you all of the things that could go wrong in the next 30, 40 years. And because of that, it's kind of overwhelming when you read these things. And so it can often cause the strata when they review it, because not all of them have the opportunity to sit down with the person who drafted the report, and they're huge reports. It can cause a lot of anxiety, and sometimes that leads people to make decisions that are, stressful for the other members of the strata. So I definitely think getting a second opinion, and if you're part of the conversation, just, maybe looking at options where it's phased or you're not addressing things that are unnecessary. I don't know where you sit in the council, but a lot of the time, not every single thing needs to be done as soon as it could be done.
And like I said, they're not saying it should be all done. They're just saying we should start the project because that's what it says in the depreciation report. But I kind of went back to council because the resolution was just give us a bunch of money and we're going to work on a project. And I went back and said, well, hang on a sec. How the depreciation report says we should have the plumbing inspected by a mechanical technician. So have we had a mechanical technician look at it, or what are you basing this on? And then, I got some information, but not a lot. So I don't think they've really gotten to the point where they've done their due diligence before they've started asking for money to the phased approach, which is why I'm kind of doing my own personal due diligence, because I want to be able to understand what questions I should be asking.
So if I can just jump in, I know we're talking about PolyB, but I just want to enlighten you to a couple of little things here. With that regulation in part 6.2, having a repair and maintenance protocol on everything, and I often use this to explain it to people, is wood siding will last into infinity if you have the correct repair and maintenance protocol. And that shocks people because we all know wood won't. And I use it for that effect. But if every time before you paint the siding, which you should be doing in 10 to 12 year cycles, you repair any damaged pieces and then you paint. If you do that, you'll find at the end of 30 years, your building will look the same as when you started. But you've achieved two major things in that period. One is you have shared the cost of that repair and maintenance with all of the owners over 30 years. By replacing it, you have picked on a certain group and you've made them pay for everything, and that's unfair. But the most important thing is you never cross the line in building code. Building code is extremely important because if your building was built in 1982, it's probably built to the 1980 building code, which means that if you replace that system in its entirety, you need to comply with the current code, the latest code, which means your costs have gone up significantly. The regulator is very smart in creating our legislation this way, and I personally think it's the best in the country because they're prioritizing repair and maintenance. That's what we do with our cars. Could you imagine driving a car and your fan belt breaks and you get out and walk away and buy a new one? That's a replacement protocol. It's stupid.
Yeah.
So,
okay, let's
right.
have some concluding remarks. Christian, what do you want to say?
I would say, realize that the insurance industry is changing always. What is allowed today may not be allowed tomorrow. We have seen some insurers that, for example, family insurance, which was friendly to PolyB, is no longer in that game. But there are options out there. Gore Mutual is one, Chubb for higher end homes. Waypoint has a program. We have a program that will allow it when it's copper crimped. So there are options to consider for all homes. The mow and flow, I feel like I sell their product sometimes. I should probably get a cut of it. I don't know, but it's great. They do prevent a lot of losses and some headaches too. So,
And that's
Okay.
good advice.
Russell, what do you have to say?
I think for everybody, you need to be aware that sometimes when people tell you to do something, it may not be the truth, and investigate yourself. I think if you go into anything just believing what you're told, you're likely to pay much more across a lot of years than you really need to.
From my perspective, just so you know, I know that buyers don't like to see PolyB. And it's probably because they're being educated by their insurance agents. And I know we have started, I have a listing where we have PolyB and we have disclosed it to everybody up front in our latent defect form so that it's completely obvious and it's not something that's on the property disclosure statement. It's a separate document. The reason why we don't put it on the property disclosure statement is because it has caused issues. So in the past, and we've been unable to get this insurance. So I appreciate the fact that Waypoint is able to insure if you have the copper fittings. I also know that it can be an issue. So from the buyer perspective, Sean, do you want to add anything?
I mean, I think you touched on all of it. Really, I think it's just helping people understand that it doesn't condemn a home to have PolyB. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable plumbing from years previous. It's just you got a higher failure rate than some other options and you need to monitor it.
Okay. All right. So how do people get in touch with you, Christian, if they want to get in touch with you regarding insurance?
yeah, I would say that the best way is to call me. You can call me at 604-833-9590, or you can email me at cgourlay@waypoint.ca.
Okay. And Russell, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, James and I are both applied science technologists and technician registrants. My number is 778-351-1928. That's my office number. And I'm sure James is going to give you his number as well. And I hope he does.
Mine is local too. It's 250-478-3580.
All right. Sean, how do people reach you?
Best thing that you can do is call or text. It's 250-589-4166. And how about you, Jane?
Wendy's asking everybody to put their phone numbers in the chat, so I'll do that, Jane. Okay, 250-744-0775. Okay, my name's Jane Johnston. I'm with the Briar Hill Group at Remax Camosun. You can reach me at briarhillgroup@gmail.com. And my number is 250-744-0775. And you can watch these videos and more on our YouTube channels, Sean Provencher and myself. And we'll be sharing it out also on social media. So if you have any questions, just give us a call. Russell, I'm going to put your number down, please.
778-351-1928.
I'd like to give a big thank you to all of the people who came to speak tonight. We really appreciate all of your expertise and coming and sharing with us after hours. So we really appreciate it.
I'd like to meet you all at the Empress for dinner if you guys are free. Anyway, just saying.
Okay. We're going to be doing these info sessions on probably on a Wednesday night. This is the first one we're doing, actually. We both consider it a great service to everybody. It's unbiased, of course. And I'm glad you came. And we'll, if you want, all of you registered. So if you're okay with it, we'll email you a follow-up and we'll ask you if you want to be part of this in the future. Okay. Thanks for coming. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great
Appreciate
night.
it.
That went well. Thank you.
Thank you.